Hi guys, it's Luetin here, and we're back with some more Naval Strike discussion. Now obviously there's two new attachments coming in. There's the 3GL and also the anti-helicopter mines. And I'm joined by Daskro today, who's going to be discussing with me about these two new attachments. We're going to be trying to define a little bit around them, give you guys some more information about actually how these things break down, how they might be implemented, because as of right now we don't really have a lot of information. And also bear in mind this is kind of speculation, but hopefully with some of the things that we'll discuss, some of the information that we'll give you guys, it's going to help to sort of break this down a little bit and maybe give you a better understanding of actually how these things might be implemented into the game. So Daskro, should we start off with the 3GL, seeing as this is the slightly more simple one?
Yeah.
Do you want to
let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, do you want to just kind of break down essentially what it is to begin with? Because it's basically, guys, it's an attachment for the assault rifles, but there's some kind of key information that we found out. So Daskro, do you want to go on?
Yes. So for those that have watched Discovery Channel in the last 10 years, you have probably seen the 3GL featured on Discovery Channel's Future Weapons. It's also known as the Metal Storm. It is a system that utilizes an electronic firing device so that you can load multiple projectiles into a single barrel, and then with a electronic trigger, fire each of those projectiles one after another, so that it allows you to essentially have a deeper magazine capacity of that within that given barrel without having to reload. Now, the 3GL specifically is a 40 millimeter grenade launcher, where at least in the more recent iterations of it, you could have three 40 millimeter grenades on top of each other and able to fire each of those individually without having to reload a new grenade into the chamber. There is no chamber. It's just a tube with some components that allow you to engage these electronic firing mechanisms within the gun.
Yeah, and this is the thing that we're kind of wondering about, is how the hell are they going to balance this? I mean, the quote right here are from the the real life sheets, and it says in the first few seconds of a squad being equipped with 3GLs, they can unleash 3 times the number of 40mm grenades on the enemy, whether in a planned attack or in a response to an ambush by the enemy. Now, I just can't imagine how they're going to implement this, like, Daskro, why did they, who approved this? Like, I just don't get it. I mean, I'm curious whether they're going to put some kind of adjustment in terms of damage onto the grenades, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just 3 grenades in a tube rather than 1. And I think there's going to be some people out there probably quite worried by this. I am. I mean, we already know how frustrating it can be. You turn a corner or you're kind of moving across an area and bam, that, like grenade tube hits you. This, I don't know. What do you think about this? Do you think this is going to be quite a bad thing? Do you think they're going to balance this at all? I'm worried, to be honest.
I have to think that they're going to have to do something with how these grenades operate. Maybe they don't have as much range. Maybe their blast radius isn't as large. Maybe the damage isn't as high. But let's think about the semi-automatic grenade launchers already in the game. The MGL, a battlefield pickup, is a 40 millimeter grenade launcher that holds 6 grenades.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, when you pick that thing up and you start rocking it out, you can destroy anyone in your path super easy. Those grenades do so much damage that you don't even have to worry about it. If you can't kill them in 2 grenades, the third one will surely seal the deal when you're going against adversaries. So I have to think they're going to do something different to make this balance, or else everyone is going to want to go for it. Why not? It'll be crazy grenade spams, and maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what the battlefielders want.
I can imagine one person being bad enough, and perhaps, okay, it can only carry 3, so once you fired your 3, that's it. So, you come around a corner, there's maybe a few people, spam, 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 they will go down. But then, if you've got a guy there with some ammo, you're going to be good to go straight away. But, I mean, just one guy's bad enough. Imagine if you have, like, a squad, and they're all, like, 4 out of a squad, all running assault, all running 3GL. It could be a, goddamn domination. It could be appalling.
And that's something that I am sort of thinking about in this, is that maybe the limitation is you just can't reload it. Maybe you get 3 grenade rounds and that's it. Because unlike traditional grenade launchers, I do not believe, at least from the research that I've done, that you can easily reload the 3GL ammunition in the field. I don't think you can do it while you're in the foxhole, so to speak, and just put in a bunch of additional grenades in.
True.
I think it requires a bit more effort, and if that's the case, then maybe that's a way of tempering it. But even then, I mean, how many people out there
just trading
are going to be doing that? Some guys may say, "Hey, give me 3 grenades in this. I'm going to be golden, and if I die, okay." But 3 grenades is going to be great.
I mean, I always say, you know, KD at the end of a round, it's not the be-all and end-all of a game because everybody has a different role to play. On the other hand, if you look at the KD of an end of a round, look how many people end up in that kind of one-to-one situation. So if that person's dying every time they see another enemy in the first place, they're not going to care about the ability to reload this thing because they're just going to be back up again with that weapon in hand already. And it could just make life miserable for the people on the other end of it. But, you know, we'll see, guys. You know, we really don't know any more than that, but that's how it operates. Drop your thoughts below about the 3GL. I'm very curious about it myself. I always find it like this comedy thing. I just don't know. I kind of cannot get my head around how this is going to be balanced, but we'll see. I think, like Daskro said, if the kind of blast radius could be decreased significantly, so you have to be quite accurate with it, but then it kind of defeats the point, doesn't it, Daskro? I mean, like, if you're going to have a very reduced blast radius, what's the point? You may as well just use your gun, you know? It seems a curious one. Maybe if you had a few people clustered together, you know? So if you have like 3 or 4 people clustered together and you fire this thing in there, because of their close proximity, then perhaps it has more of a purpose than actually firing your weapon. But say somebody's kind of on the run across a road or running to some piece of cover, you start to fire this thing, they'll take a little few, you know, hit markers, but it's not maybe enough to actually take them down. So we'll have to see, but I don't know.
It could, you know, what if the damage and blast radius was more similar to the USAS 12 with frag rounds?
Yeah, possibly.
If you only had three frag rounds to shoot, okay, yeah, you'll probably kill 1, maybe 2 people, maybe. They got to be really close up, but I have to think that maybe the threshold is 2 or 3 for frag 12, and maybe they'll just say, hey, even though that 12 gauge shotgun round versus 40 millimeter round, oh, who cares? Well, you know, we want to balance it. Maybe they'll do something like that.
Yeah.
And that solves the issue.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So, guys, anyway, as we say, drop your thoughts about this. I'll be curious to see what you think. Okay, moving on. The anti-helicopter mines. Now, already this has been quite a bone of contention. Again, both of these things, actually, when I read them, I was like, really? The helicopter mines are quite obscure. We read a little bit about it tonight, Daskro, didn't we? And they seem, you know, they're not very prominent. They're not something particularly well known. And how they're actually going to be implemented into the game is curious. Before we get into all that, though, do you want to just outline for us, Daskro, again, what the anti-helicopter mines are in their kind of current situation and how we may see them in Battlefield 4?
Sure. The anti-helicopter mine is a relatively obscure weapon. It is a weapon that's developed rather recently, and what it is that it is essentially a sort of like a claymore mine, except that it's pointed upwards, and it's meant to be able to take out helicopters at very low altitudes. We're talking about 100 meters or less, and it has some different types of sensors on it, in which when a helicopter that meets the various identifications will then try to engage that target, and engages it with really 2 different types of warheads. It engages it with an explosive form penetrator, which is essentially a copper sabot that is lunged into the air and then tries to sort of hit that aircraft directly. Think of it like as a big copper spear, and then it also fires a bunch of small steel balls that create sort of a canister shot-like effect to try to destroy some of the more critical subcomponents of the helicopter, such as the rotor blades or even the engine, trying to disable components of it so that it can't operate. That's basically how it operates. Bulgaria is one of the big ones that use it. Russia came out more recently with their own version of it. It's a very limited application weapon. It's really designed to try to take out helicopters that are trying to land or take off from a very specific area. 100 meters in altitude, it's sort of maximum range. That is that is not a lot for distance. That is really a helicopter is coming down to drop off people or to pick up people, and you want to take it out. So it's a very obscure weapon, but perhaps in Battlefield it'll offer sort of some different tactics for the engineering class or even the support class when taking out some of those low-flying helicopters.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And when I first kind of read it and some of the initial things I kind of researched, it sounded quite worrying. But actually, the more that I've kind of thought about it, and when you actually see what the thing looks like, guys, and I'll have put a picture up for you in this video to show you what it looks like. Like you said, it is kind of more of a Claymore-like device. So I think when people think helicopter mine, I think people are imagining lots of mines scattered around on the ground, and as a helicopter comes in, they kind of spring up and throw a load of stuff into the air to take out the helicopter. That's not really how these things function. It's more kind of an object that you sit down, and then when it detects an incoming aircraft, it kind of fires the stuff towards it. So again, this may be literally, you maybe only carry one in your kit as an infantry, or maybe you have max 2, kind of like Claymores, although it's a reasonably sizable device, so perhaps they will only allow you to have one. But again, how damaging is it going to be? Is it going to be a one-hit kill? Is it going to take it to sort of a disabled state so the helicopter starts to come down but it's savable? We don't know. Again, maybe it's something that you use as a backup device. So we already know that kind of s'mores and RPGs, that's going to take down a heli pretty badly. But again, maybe with this thing, it starts to slow, if it hits first of all, that'll start to slow the heli maybe out of control, and that enables you to then get that kind of heli as he's coming in, finish it off as well. So again, we don't really know in terms of damage or application how this thing is going to work, but just from a point of view of actually kind of understanding the mechanics behind it, that's pretty interesting, because straight away it puts you into a situation where you can start to think of scenarios where it would actually be used in the game. My first thought when I sort of was looking at this was Obliteration. Obliteration is a game mode where you actually need to defend these targets in a large operating area, as opposed to things like Rush or Conquest. I mean, Conquest, I can't really imagine a situation this might be used unless, for example, there was a regular flight path area. Okay, so you knew helicopters were kind of shuttling up and down between objective points. You may kind of sit it. I mean, let's think of something coming up in Second Assault. Okay, Gulf of Oman. All right, on Gulf of Oman, transport helicopters often traveling between different bases there. So maybe, okay, perhaps towards sort of C or B in those areas, you often have helicopters kind of traveling and dropping people off there. So maybe on a rooftop, you may drop down your anti-heli mine right there, and as the helicopters kind of coming in, often drop people off on the rooftops or just passing over, this thing will enact, bam, hits the heli, turns it off to the side, clips the building, down they go. So there might be some kind of action like that, we'll have to see. But as I say, Obliteration, that was another one. If you have those kind of MCOM stations for Obliteration, you've got to take the bomb and destroy those. You could set this thing down, and often you see a scout heli being used to transport the bomb carrier across to an area. If you had positioned this correctly, that might be the saving grace. Maybe you were kind of in the general area trying to defend, but as we often know, a lot of people kind of move forward, they don't stay on the bases, so maybe this gives you a little bit more option as an individual to help you try and defend the individual bases. But Daskro, how powerful do you think this is going to be? Do you obviously we don't know, but speculating, what would you imagine that they would sort of put this in place in terms of damage and what it's going to do to helis?
What we do know with the anti-helicopter mine from the various specs that are out there is that it has 2 different warheads. It has the explosive form penetrator, which is sort of like shooting an RPG at a helicopter, versus a bunch of steel balls that are fragmenting and trying to do a much less damage on the helicopter. Think of it like a canister shot or a claymore mine. I like the idea there's 2 different warheads because it means that perhaps there is an amount of accuracy that can be done to increase its lethality. Perhaps think about this, for instance. What if you could actually be a bit more precise with how you point these anti-helicopter mines, much more so than the Claymore? So perhaps you can go into you're playing a support class and you go into this view where you can see exactly where that explosive form penetrator is going to hit. And so if that helicopter comes in and goes right over that explosive form penetrator target area, you'll get a 50% damage to it or a 60% damage to it, whereas if it just goes around the periphery and gets hit by some of the steel fragments, maybe it doesn't do that much damage, but does a disable or just does a bit of damage. I like the idea of that on maps like Zava 311, where you always know that there's going to be some transport helicopters that are get on top of those buildings. I love the idea that that they may push up on that very top area of that building and try to land that transport helicopter. So you position that mine just right. So if they want to do that, they're going to be in for a surprise. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think my last thought just about this is in terms of sort of spread and arc. Because I don't think these things, they can't kind of move by themselves. It's not like they kind of turn towards an object. Is that correct? They're sort of set up and, inanimate. They're just placed in situ. And then hopefully it comes in correctly and it sets off. But if it went the other way around, it would totally miss it. So again, if you had to sort of speculate on this, do you think how wide a kind of spread do you think it would have for us? I mean, is it going to be fairly narrow, or what would you imagine?
I have to think that it's not going to be. It's going to be pretty narrow. I have to think that thinking about how these systems operate in real life, or at least how other systems that do sort of wide area fragmentation, you have two options. You can either put a lot of steel in a very specific area and get and maximize your lethality within that smaller area, or you can do a much larger scatter shot. And if you have a much larger scatter shot, you may hit some of the target, but you may not do that much damage to it. I suspect that in this game, they'll probably have it pretty wide. Maybe, I wouldn't say as wide as like the kind of blast radius that we see with the active radar missiles, but maybe something comparable. Maybe it does a little bit of damage, but if you only got one or two of these set up, getting a small amount of damage done by the active radar missile isn't a deal breaker. So that's maybe a good proxy that we can use to look at how effective in the range of the scatter this weapon could do.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys, so we'll wrap it up there. But two new gadgets coming into Battlefield 4 with Naval Strike. Both of them perhaps actually a little bit more to them than initially meets the eye. They sound quite straightforward on principle. When you actually get into them and start looking at how those things operate, there's actually a lot to think about there. So as we say, drop your thoughts below, guys. Thank you, Daskro, for joining me today.
Thank you.
And guys, we'll see you very soon for some more Battlefield 4 and Naval Strike Second Assault.